Okay, please take your seats so we can continue. We are still in the violation cases. We are now at case number 2020-233, Stevens County. And Ms. Koch, if you would please brief us on that. Please.
Secretary. Is it working? Oh.
It is.
It is now. Okay. Do you want me to? Oh my God. The Secretary of State's office initiated this investigation based on a complaint received from Rebecca Bennett, chairwoman of Stevens County Republican Party. Bennett reported that she has filed numerous complaints against Stevens County Chief Registrar Erica Gober to report that Gober had continuously failed to adhere to the rules regarding the fundamentals of the election process for the past few election cycles, which has caused confusion and raised questions about the integrity of Stevens County elections process. Specifically, it was alleged that the Chief Registrar for Stevens County Board of Elections failed to, 1, properly communicate with board members of the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration, 2, failed to properly communicate with the media, 3, failed to ensure it posted and/or communicated with official party representation, candidates' campaigns, or other party officials that wish to observe. 4, failed to complete a reconciliation and/or tracking of ballots with adjudication issues, a potential violation of Georgia Code OCGA 21-2493. And 5, properly ensure absentee ballots went through the proper verification process. Based on the evidence provided, there was not enough evidence presented to conclude with certainty that the respondent did not properly communicate with board members of the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration, failed to properly communicate with the media, and failed to ensure it posted and/or communicated with official party representation, candidates/campaigns, or other party officials that wish to observe. Therefore, these allegations were unsubstantiated. The allegation that Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration improperly handled and processed absentee ballots were substantiated. However, these violations were identified in case investigation SEB 2020-156. The investigation identified sufficient evidence to suggest the respondent failed to comply with the closing of the polls requirements when it failed to maintain a zero tape reflecting voting devices were set to 0, verifying no votes were present on the voting equipment. They did not prepare or maintain the proper election records to show a discrepancy was properly investigated and/or reconciled regarding the total number of ballots, as the number of rescanned ballots reportedly did not match ballots printed at closing. The Assistant Registrar reported poll officials were not adequately trained and did not know how to perform certain functions related to the elections process. Therefore, there is evidence to suggest that the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration failed to comply with OCGA 21-299A that required the election superintendent to ensure poll officers and workers received adequate training in all aspects of state and federal law applicable to conducting elections. For potential violations, Ms. Gober, the Chief Registrar, Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration board members, Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration. The investigation identified there is no record of opening the polls election records on file with the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration or with the Georgia Secretary of State's office, suggesting the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration violated official election record document processes when it 1, failed to document all voting equipment had the appropriate seals and that the electronic poll books, electronic ballot markers, and ballot scanners all indicated 0 counts prior to the opening of the polls. Georgia Election Code 21-450C3, opening of polls procedure when ballot labels misplaced, certification by managers, machines to be locked until polls open, officers to be near machines, inspection of machines, broken machines, it stipulates The manager shall sign a certificate showing the identifying number or other designation of the voting machine, the delivery of the keys in a sealed envelope, the number on the seal upon the machine, the number registered on the protective counter or device, and that all counters were set to 0. 6, that the ballot labels are properly placed into the machine. This certificate shall be returned by the chief manager to the superintendent with the other certificates as provided in this part. 2, the investigation identified there is no record of closing of the polls, election records on file with the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration or with the Georgia Secretary of State's office. This suggests that the Stevens County Board of Elections and Registration violated official election record document processes when it failed to complete a ballot recap sheet and failed to properly investigate and/or reconcile the total number of ballots following the reported discrepancy and/or palpable error, and as a result, it violated Georgia Election Code 212493B, computation, canvassing, and tabulation of returns, investigation of discrepancies in vote counts, and recount of procedure or certification of returns, change in returns. The superintendent, before computing the votes cast in any precinct, shall compare the registration figures with the certificates returned by the poll officers showing the number of persons who vote in each precinct or the number of ballots cast. If, upon consideration by the superintendent of the returns and certificates before him or her from any precinct, it shall appear that the total vote returned for any candidate or candidates for the same office or nomination on any question exceeds the number of electors in such precinct or exceeds the total number of persons who voted in such precinct or the total number of ballots cast therein, such excess shall be deemed a discrepancy and palpable error and shall be investigated by the superintendent. Based on violations noted in case investigation SEB 2020-156 and on the statement by the assistant registrar that poll officials were not adequately trained and did not know how to perform certain functions related to the elections process, there is sufficient evidence to suggest that Stevens County Board of Registration and Elections Chief Registrar failed to comply with the provisions of the law that requires the election superintendent to ensure poll officers and workers received adequate training in all aspects of state and federal law applicable to conducting elections. As a result, it appears Stevens County Board of Registration and Elections is in violation of OCGA 21-299A, instruction of poll officers and workers in an election procedures, certifications, notification of completion of training to Secretary of State.
So those are the allegations in case number and the found recommended violations in case number 2020-033. I noticed there was a second report of investigation, Ms. Koch. Should we take these up separately, do you think, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So is there anybody here from Stevens County that would like to comment on the violations that are proposed? Apparently not. Is there any discussion among the board as to the proposed process that we'll undergo for the allegations in 2020-33? We always start off this way when I ask that question.
Yeah.
There's this long pause.
And Mr. Chairman, absent any additional evidence from Stevens County, I would move to accept the recommendations.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the recommendation, which is that the violations have been supported. But the recommendation, I guess, would be to send it to the Attorney General's office. But I'll tell you, it looks to me like the last case that we had similar to this, that the facts have been developed. There hasn't been any response to them. And I would say that we refer this to the Attorney General's office with the request that it be set up for a prompt hearing.
I would accept that as an amendment to my motion.
A prompt hearing. So I would I would amend it in that way, that we have, that the recommendation is to refer to the Attorney General's office for a prompt hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? Has it been seconded? Somebody? Yes.
Mashburn, second.
There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. Next, Scott, explain to me why we have the same number for two investigations, but are labeled differently. So the next one I have is 2020-33, procedures for early tabulation of absentee ballots, also from Stevens County. Did we just combine those?
What do you have?
No, this was the last one I did.
Yeah, the next one, Mr. Chairman, should be Montgomery County.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. But Montgomery County, 2020-34, duty to secure election records. Could you brief us on that, Ms. Crawford? I was looking at it.
Yes, this one had 4 allegations. The first one is Greg Palmer reported that 2 boxes of election records were in an unsecured closet in the Montgomery courthouse. Mr. Palmer alleged that someone could have used the records to fraudulently submit absentee ballots. The records were given to the Georgia State Patrol for safekeeping until they could be reviewed by a representative of the Office of the Georgia Secretary of State. The second allegation, Greg Palmer reported that Gary Brady called Robert Dixon multiple times and harassed him regarding picking up his absentee ballot. Allegation 3, Greg Palmer reported that Alston Precinct failed to open on time and both Billy and Kathy Curl were not able to vote. Allegation 4, Greg Palmer reported that Darwin Williamson, Tyler Williamson, and Peggy Williamson were moved to a different precinct without being notified. Greg Palmer also reported that Bobby Carpenter notified the Williamsons that their absentee ballots had been lost, then later notified them that they had been found and would be shredded. The findings are allegation 1, there is evidence to suggest that Montgomery County election staff failed to properly secure 2 boxes of election records from 2013 and 2014. The records were in an unsecured closet in the men's restroom on the 2nd floor of the Montgomery courthouse. Both probate judge Ruby Sanders and chief registrar Bobby Carpenter stated that they did not know the records were in the closet and have never used the closet for storage. Both said all the election records were stored on the 3rd floor. There was no evidence to suggest that the records were used to produce fraudulent absentee ballots as originally reported by complainant Greg Palmer. There was no evidence to support violations of Georgia election law for allegations 2 through 4. All voters mentioned in these allegations were not disenfranchised and were able to vote. The potential violations were for Montgomery Board of Registrars, Bobby Carpenter, the chief registrar, and probate judge Ruby Sanders, election superintendent. There's evidence to suggest that Montgomery Board of Registrars, Bobby Carpenter, and Judge Ruby Sanders violated OCGA 21-500 subsection A, delivery of voting materials, presentation to grand jury in certain cases, and preservation and destruction of unused ballots, when they failed to properly secure 2 boxes of election documentation from 2013 and 2014 until it could be destroyed. The boxes were in an unsecured closet in the men's restroom on the 2nd floor of the Montgomery courthouse.
So the allegations regarding Montgomery County's securing of election records has been summarized. Is there anybody here from Montgomery County that would like to respond? In that microphone, if you'll speak in it, I don't know if you have to turn that on or not. Whoever's going to speak. Is that on, do you know?
Hello.
There you go, okay, good, thank you. We're ready.
Just speak to what we know.
Introduce
Okay.
yourselves.
Okay, I'm Ruby Nell Sanders. I'm the election superintendent of Montgomery County, Georgia, and probate judge. And this is, I'll let Bobby introduce herself.
I'm Bobby Carpenter, Chief Registrar.
Could you repeat your last name? I didn't get. Carpenter?
Carpenter.
Thank you. All right, proceed.
See?
Yes.
Ms. Bob's going to have to help refresh this because it's actually in some records that we had stored, or she had stored them. We were a little puzzled, been since 2013, so we were a little puzzled as to why they were found in the closet. It's not in the men's room, but they kind of make it sound to that. It's a mechanical closet where tags and things like that are kept. Because she normally stored everything on the third floor. We've had prisoners in, moving out a bunch of stuff for the clerk's office and junk and all from the third floor back during that time. We don't know if that's when they might have got moved to that room. Okay, that room did always stay locked. The county was having cameras installed. It's an electrical room. The people installing the cameras had a key to go and come. We had no idea. Well, to start with, we really didn't know those things were in there. They're old, and we just, I don't know, you get busy and you just didn't realize they were in there. So as far as we know, that's what, don't know exactly how they became about being in that room, but we do know that that room is normally always locked. And it's just that as they were installing the cameras, they were going and coming after hours and everything, these people were that were doing the installation. And apparently had just left it open because they were constantly going in there to use the mechanical part of it. Got anything else to say? That's about it. But I will say Miss Bobby is very conscientious. Had she known there was anything wrong, she would have cleared it up. She's Johnny on top of everything.
I try to be.
Any questions?
Do you have a regular process for destroying the documentation after 2 years? What's the regular procedure that you do with that? After the statutory period in which you have to maintain those records is up, what's your normal procedure there?
We normally have them shredded
Okay.
and disposed on the side.
Now, the ones that were
At
there,
that time, we didn't have a shredder. We had, wherever we could get somebody to take them and dispose of them. And it was just like Judge Sanders says, we didn't know they were in there, and we didn't know until they brought it to our attention.
My concern is this, that, these are official records. There is a process by which you are allowed to dispose of them. You have an obligation to store them properly. I think that requires you to have a system so that you know that all the records that are supposed to be where they're supposed to be are there, that somebody goes through every 2 years to see what it is that you can destroy, and that there's just accountability for the records and awareness of what records you have and which records are being destroyed. And in this case, I'm not sure exactly what the system is that you have to make sure that you're tracing and tracking all the records. And secondly, why it took so long to figure out that they were gone. And the reason why there's a rule is to protect the records that are created by voters.
she can speak as to how she normally stores them. These are just kind of a unique situation. There were the only 2 boxes out there. Somehow they got
Right.
It's a mystery. We did not know they had not been destroyed. If you come to our courthouse, you check, everything's been destroyed up to 2020. But these 2 boxes were misplaced or forgotten or something. They were stored under lock and key until those workers went in and unlocked the door, and we didn't know. And then this person just came on site that had no business in the courthouse, but he found those boxes.
So what's your system for maintaining and tracking records today?
Well, we have, we destroy them as the years, 2 years, 5 years.
You just keep them in boxes on shelves?
No, we have them stored on 3rd floor under lock and key.
Just sort of, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just build on that. What he's perhaps asking for, what I'm asking, is, for instance, do you have a log
Oh, yes.
that indicates, not only where it was stored, but the date in which it can be destroyed, and confirming that it has been? Does your log contain all that information on it?
Yes, sir.
And did your log contain a reference that the 2013, 2014 records had in fact been destroyed?
No.
So if that record was, if there was no indication of that, did somebody say, well, where are the 2012 and 2013 records? They're missing. Or to go look for them and just say, they haven't been destroyed when they were supposed to be destroyed. Where are they? Let's go look and see if they're still there. Because it sounds like somebody else found them, not the,
Well,
There was some other hands-on on TV, but I don't want to speak to that.
okay.
You do have some video, but,
would you like to see a video of it?
I can't hear you.
Would you like to see a video of it?
A
The way it
video
got
of-
moved around?
A video of what?
Of the way the boxes got moved out of the room.
with the boxes actually in their hand, it didn't, and to do the elections, did not organize for anything. They had them. Our sheriff has the video, but we just did not intend to try to play it. I mean, we felt like, it's something that happened, and we do take full responsibility, even though we really don't have a good explanation because we had no idea it was unlocked.
Right.
It was just sort of circumstances, I guess, that we should have kept up with. But when you're having elections and you're doing everything else too, new elections coming since 2013 and 14, it's just hard to. And I mean, it was just something that just an oversight. And I'm sorry. Didn't intend to. Not intentional.
But we do have a shredder on the site now. So this won't happen again.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. So does anybody have a motion on this matter?
I'll move to accept the recommendations and to make the referral with the hope of working out some type of specific remediation, particularly in terms of the records. So yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendations with the instruction that the parties, the Attorney General and representatives of the county promptly discuss with each other whether or not they can resolve this. So with that motion, is there any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion passes. The next is matter number 2020039, Sumter County polling place issues. Scotch?
This case has 6 allegations. Allegation 1, Kimberly Page reported that her name was listed incorrectly on the ballot and it should have been Kimberly Taylor Page. When she spoke with the election supervisor, Randy Howard, he said it was too late because the ballots had already been printed. Ms. Page later discovered that another candidate was allowed to change her name after Ms. Page's request was denied. Allegation 2, Kimberly Page reported that a poll worker told voter Stephen Millage not to vote for Kimberly Page. Allegation 3. Kimberly Page reported that she paid to have her political ad ran on local radio station. Ms. Page's opponent, Stephanie Bennett, completed a public service announcement honoring veterans on the same radio station without purchasing a political ad. Allegation 4. Kimberly Page reported that the election supervisor's sister, Aletha, was hired as a poll manager for the Leslie voting precinct. Ms. Page alleged that around 8 p.m., Aletha was overheard saying she already knew Stephanie Bennett had won. Ms. Page also alleged a board member also said Stephanie Bennett had won. Ms. Page alleged this was done before all the ballots were counted. Allegation 5. Kimberly Page alleged the voting precinct located at Thompson Southwest Volunteer Fire Station did not open at 7 a.m., and as a result, a voter was unable to vote. Allegation 6. Kimberly Page alleged a lot of voters did not receive their absentee ballots until the day of the election. The findings. The investigator interviewed all available witnesses, and there was no evidence to support any violations of Georgia election law for allegations 1 through 5. Allegation 6. During the interview with Ethel Hollis, she mentioned she lived in a rural part of Americus, Georgia, but used her mother-in-law's address on North Jackson Street to receive mail. Ms. Hollis's ENET inquiry showed she also used North Jackson Street as her registered voting address, which through her own admission is an address she no longer resided. Ms. Hollis said she had a post office box in Americus, Georgia. Ms. Hollis' current address is on U.S. Highway 280 in Americus, Georgia. Ms. Hollis stated she was going to update her registered voting address. However, at the time of this report, the address still has not been updated. The potential violation. There is evidence to suggest Ethel Hollis violated OCGA 21-2-218, cancellation of registration in former state or county, address change and corrections, when she failed to notify the Board of Registrars that she moved from Highway 280 West Americus, Georgia. One count.
Is there anybody here from, well, is Ms. Hollis here? Or is there anybody else here to speak on behalf of the county? All right, then.
I have a question. Do you happen to know whether or not the address where Ms. Hollis actually resided was also in Sumter County, or was it outside the county limits? It's an Americus address, but it's just not entirely clear.
Let me see.
And the reason I ask is because it seems to me that this is very similar to this morning's case, which we voted on a letter because there was not, while it's a technical violation, any votes would still be valid from the former address.
That was the one with the temporary address?
Yes, yes, exactly.
I don't have that in the report, if it was the same. It just says both Americus, it doesn't say.
Okay.
What would you like to do with this? We could continue it and find out an answer to that question, or we could, it's possible still to send a letter and say that that's an obligation.
I think I would move to send a letter of instruction to the voter with the instruction that every voter has an obligation to update their registered address as their current residence, but not to refer this to the Attorney General's office, because assuming that this address is still in the same county.
Second.
Any discussion? It's been moved in Senate and seconded that we send a letter of instruction instructing as to the obligations to change registrations by providing new addresses, and that we do that with a letter and not a violation. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. The next is case number 2020-048. And Ms. Koch, if you would please brief us on that.
Election Supervisor Carol Hurd reported that 4 Decatur County voters potentially voted twice in the June 9th, 2020 general primary. The voters were identified as Pamela Rouse, Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story Jr. There's evidence to suggest Decatur County voters Pamela Rouse, Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story all voted twice during the June 9th, 2020 general primary election. Pamela Rouse voted advance in person on October 19th, 2020, and in person on Election Day. Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story all submitted an absentee ballot in addition to voting in person on Election Day. Charles Murphy was identified as the poll manager for the Fairgrounds Exhibit Hall polling location, which was where voter Larry Clemens was allowed to vote in person on June 9th, 2020, after having already submitting an absentee ballot. Mr. Murphy was aware of the proper procedure on how to call in and verify with the elections office if a voter was shown to have already voted. Margaret Bryant was identified as the poll manager for the Memorial Coliseum polling location, which was where voter Pamela Rouse was allowed to vote in person on June 9th, 2020, after already voting in person during the advance voting period. This was also the polling location where voters Shirley Story and Lloyd Story were allowed to vote in person on June 9th, 2020, after having already submitting an absentee ballot. Ms. Bryant was aware of the proper procedure on how to call in and verify with the elections office if a voter was shown to have already voted. However, she claimed she was instructed not to do so by her supervisor, Carol Hurd. Election Supervisor Carol Hurd did not recall ever telling polling staff specifically not to call the office. Ms. Hurd said the weekend before the election, she and her staff went through the electors list and marked who had already voted, and the lists were provided to each of the polling locations. Ms. Hurd instructed the polling staff to check the electors list first because they may experience trouble getting through to the office due to high call volume. Ms. Hurd said the polling staff could have called in if they had a question. The potential violations for Pamela Rouse, Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story. There's evidence to suggest that Pamela, Larry, Shirley, and Lloyd violated OCGA 21-2-572, repeat voting in same primary or election, when they voted more than one time during the June 9th, 2020 general primary election. Voter Pamela Rouse voted advance in person on May 19th, 2020, in addition to voting in person on Election Day. Voters Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story submitted absentee ballots in addition to voting in person on Election Day. There's evidence to suggest Decatur County Board of Elections and Registration, Carol Hurd, Charles Murphy, and Margaret Bryant violated OCGA 21-2-388 subsection 2, cancellation of absentee ballots of electors who are present in election precinct during primaries and elections, when they failed to properly verify whether Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, or Lloyd Story's absentee ballot had been received before allowing them to vote in person on Election Day. This resulted in all three voters voting twice during the June 9th, 2020 general primary election. There's evidence to suggest that Decatur County Board of Elections and Registration, Carol Hurd, and Margaret Bryant violated OCGA 21-2-590, poll officer permitting unqualified persons to vote, when Pamela Rouse was allowed to vote on Election Day when she had already cast her ballot during early advanced voting.
Those are the potential violations against Pamela Ross, Larry Clemens, Shirley Story, and Lloyd Story. And the recommended violations is against the Decatur County Board of Elections and Registration, the election supervisor, Carol Hurd, and poll managers, Charles Murphy and Margaret Bryant, as well as the final recommendation of a violation against the Decatur Board of Directors and Registration, Carol Hurd and Margaret Bryant. Are Ms. Rouse, Mr. Clemens, Ms. Story, or Mr. Story here today? And would they like to respond? Apparently not. Anybody here from the Decatur County Board of Elections and Registration, or Ms. Hurd, Mr. Murphy, or Ms. Bryant? All right, apparently not. Is there a motion with respect to this recommendation?
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Let me also, if I may, do the motion first, and then I'll make a comment.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that,
It's understandable if someone is building a house, moves temporarily, and votes at their own location. It's wrong, and it warrants letting that voter know. You can't do that. I'm at a loss to figure out when any voter thinks they can vote twice. And so for that reason, I do very strongly believe it needs to get to the Attorney General's office. And for that matter, I can't figure out how an election board could allow this sort of thing to happen either. We have safeguards in place to keep this sort of thing from happening. So on both, when it comes to both the board and the voters, I look forward to hearing what the Attorney General comes up with.
well, I would say this, I can't imagine any 4 voters voting
Yeah.
twice.
That's right, 4 times.
And one of the things that troubles me most is that it's not one election supervisor or one poll manager who says that they didn't call, but it's 2, and they say they were told not to call. And that person said, I never told them not to call. That to me doesn't make sense, and I'm not sure that it's, somebody is not telling the truth, but, and I would say that rather than, I think we ought to put this on for an immediate hearing. It's straightforward. We need to get to the bottom of this and make sure that voters and election officials know that this won't be tolerated.
Yeah.
I agree in particular with respect to the voter who voted in person twice. I
Yeah.
cannot
Very
imagine
good.
circumstances that would confuse. I will say that the primary process in 2020 was extremely confusing because it initially was 2 different primaries. The presidential preference primary was separate from the general primary, and then it was consolidated and put off. So I can see where somebody may be confused that they received an absentee ballot and thought it was a separate process. So I think the fact-finding in this, in a hearing, will be very instructive and for those voters who voted both an absentee ballot and in person. But voting twice in person within 3 weeks is unquestionably, I don't see how that could happen without it being deliberate.
I'd say there are strong feelings about
Yes.
this case.
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion to refer this to the Attorney General for an immediate hearing? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion passes. The next is case number 2020-61, McIntosh County, poll problems. And would you please report on that for us, Mrs. Koch?
This one has 2 allegations. Allegation 1, Barbara Price reported she did not receive her absentee ballot in the mail, and when she tried to vote in person, was denied her right to vote. Ms. Price reported she was denied because she had requested an absentee ballot. Allegation 2, Barbara Price reported voter Gracie Townsend went to an incorrect polling precinct and wasn't allowed to turn in a completed absentee ballot or vote provisionally. There is evidence to suggest that Dolores Walker denied voter Barbara Price her right to vote during the June 9, 2020 general primary election. Ms. Price requested an absentee ballot on May 29, 2020, but claimed she did not receive it and went to vote in person on Election Day. In the original complaint, Ms. Price said she was denied her right to vote because she had requested an absentee ballot. Ms. Price's ENET inquiry showed where she requested an absentee ballot, but has never returned to McIntosh County Elections Office. In a conversation with McIntosh County Election Supervisor Eleanor Gale, Ms. Walker claimed she was unaware of what to do in the situation involving Ms. Price. Ms. Walker attended multiple poll worker training sessions leading up to the June 9, 2020 general primary election. Ms. Gale reviewed Ms. Walker's notes from the election and discovered she had called the office for a similar issue, and the voter was ultimately allowed to vote in person. There is no record in ENET of Barbara Price voting during the June 9, 2020 general election. Allegation 2. The investigator interviewed all available witnesses, and there was no evidence to support violation of Georgia election law. The potential violations: McIntosh County Board of Elections and Registration and Eleanor Gale, election supervisor. There is evidence to suggest that McIntosh County Board of Elections and Registration and Eleanor Gale violated OCGA 21-2-388 subsection 2, cancellation of absentee ballots of electors who are present in election precinct during primaries and elections, when poll manager Dolores Walker failed to properly cancel voter Barbara Price's absentee ballot and allow her to vote in person during the June 9th, 2020 general primary election.
So that's the excuse me, recommendation and proposed findings by Ms. Koch. Is there anybody here to speak on behalf of the respondents? We know, of course, that Ms. Walker is not available because she is deceased. But is Ms. Gale or anybody else here on behalf of the McIntosh County Board of Elections? Apparently not. Is there any motion on this matter?
I'll move once again to accept the recommendations and to refer to the Attorney General.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. The next is case number 2020-64 involving, I'm sorry, that's been continued. The last case is case number 2021-88, City of Arlington. Would you brief us on that, please?
The complainant reports Randolph County Election Supervisor Todd Black was contracted by the City of Arlington to conduct their March 16, 2021 municipal special election. Complainant states last week, in one day, Todd Black received 180 absentee ballot applications, all pre-filled out and then signed by the voter. The signatures were verified and ballots were sent out. The complainant reports petitioners went to court 2 days ago and argued that a judge should throw out the applications because the pre-filled out applications were not signed by the assister, presumably the person filling out the top of the application, though the law doesn't require this unless the applicant is illiterate or disabled. The complainant states the judge refused to do that, but told the county registrars in Calhoun and Early to hold hearings on the applications. The complainant advises there is, so far, no written order that Calhoun County has seen. The complainant reports Calhoun County sent letters to voters telling them their absentee ballot applications were now rejected and their voted ballots were now provisional and had to be dealt with at the hearing now scheduled for this Friday morning, and the voters have to vote in person. The complainant states election supervisor Todd Black has the voted absentee ballots which have been signature verified, and he says they are not provisional and that they will be counted, and will not let a voter who has voted absentee vote again, so those voters are being told two starkly different things. Complainant advises the Calhoun and Early boards, though, don't, in my opinion, have authority to reject absentee ballots in an election they aren't conducting. They are merely verifying the signatures for Todd Black. The investigation revealed that during the March 16, 2021 special municipal election in the City of Arlington, that Randolph County Election Supervisor Todd Black was contracted to supervise the election. One day, when Election Supervisor Black checked the P.O. box for the City of Arlington, he found a large amount of applications. It was reported there were 180 applications. Most of the applications had the voter's name, address, and date of birth typed on the top portion of the application. Election Supervisor Todd Black forwarded the applications to Calhoun and Early County so they could determine if the voters were eligible to receive an absentee ballot. Both Early and Calhoun counties compared the identifying information on the applications with the information on file in the registrar's office. The majority of the voters were found eligible to receive an absentee ballot, and they were mailed a ballot. On March 3, 2021, Betty Murdoch, Carolyn Oliver, and Sam Robinson filed a petition in Superior Court of Calhoun County to contest election. The petitioners requested the following. Petitioner's request for a hearing and in-camera inspection of applications for official absentee ballot. The argument states that the City of Arlington has less than 1,000 registered voters, and within less than 3 days of early voting, the Randolph County Board of Registrars received nearly 200 applications requesting absentee ballots. The argument states it is the petitioner's understanding that many of the applications requesting an official absentee ballot are typed on a computer. The petitioners requested an expedited hearing on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Petitioners filed an emergency motion challenging the 2021 municipal voter registration list. The petitioners state over 50 electors identified on the list but whom no longer believed to be residents of Arlington, Georgia. The deficiencies and inaccuracies also include 6 electors who are known to be deceased. The petitioners requested an expedited hearing on Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 10 a.m. On March 3rd, 2021, Calhoun County Senior Judge Joe Bishop signed an order scheduling a hearing on petitioner's emergency motion challenging the 2021 municipal voter registration list. The hearing was scheduled for March 8th, 2021. On March 9th, 2021, the Chief Registrar Sarah Causey and Deputy Chief Registrar called a meeting with the Board of Registrars so they could discuss with Judge Bishop what he had said during the hearing on March 8th. Ms. Deal provided a copy of the Board of Registrars meeting minutes, and the following were discussed in new business. The board discussed the judge's ruling on Superior Court Case 19V-103 on Monday concerning the Arlington municipal election. They discussed the included time constraints due to the election being 1 week from that day and OCGA 12-2-381. The board unanimously agreed to send the attached letter to those electors whose applications met the criteria of concern by the judge. On March 9th, 2021, Deputy Registrar Brooke Deal had the following letter served by the Sheriff's Department to 24 electors that had requested an absentee ballot during the March 16th, 2021 special municipal election. Dear Elector, pursuant to Superior Court Case 19V-103 on March 8, 2021, in accordance with OCGA 21-2-381, you are hereby informed that your application for an absentee ballot for the Arlington municipal election on March 16, 2021 has been rejected. You may still vote during advance voting or on Election Day. If you have already received a ballot, please bring that with you when you arrive to vote in person. Only your in-person ballot will be counted. Alternatively, you may complete a new absentee ballot application and mail it to Randolph County Elections, P.O. Box 23, Arlington, Georgia 39813. If you have already returned a completed ballot for Arlington Municipality election on March 16, 2021, that ballot has been declared provisional. If you wish to appeal the status of your ballot before the Calhoun County Board of Registrars, please call the voter registration office in Morgan at phone number 229-849-2972. Calls for appointments will be received between the hours of 8 a.m. to 12 noon and 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on March 9th, 10th, and 11th. Hearings will be held on March 12th in Arlington, Georgia, in the conference room of the Connor Insurance Building, located on Highland Avenue South. Please bring valid photo identification when you arrive for your hearing. Respectfully, Brooke Deal, Deputy Registrar. And then it has a list of the 24 voters that were sent that letter. Brooke Deal reported that 24 electors were chosen because their names were listed on the court documents. On March 10th, 2021, Brooke Deal reported Elections Director Chris Harvey called her and asked, "What is going on in Arlington? I keep getting calls about a letter you sent out regarding the city election." Ms. Deal stated she informed Mr. Harvey of the judge's recommendation and instructions, which prompted the Board of Registrars to send the letter out to voters and ensure a fair and pressure-free election. She advised she then read the letter to Mr. Harvey, and she informed him the board had secured a building in Arlington to make it easier for people to come in and verify their application for an absentee ballot without pressure from anyone working for any of the candidates. Ms. Deal stated Mr. Harvey had told her they could not do that and the judge did not have the authority to order that. She advised Mr. Harvey, asked her if she had that in writing, and she informed him no. Ms. Deal stated she advised Mr. Harvey that she was in court and she heard the judge's instructions in the election is next Tuesday. She said she advised Mr. Harvey that they did not have time to wait for the written order. Ms. Deal stated Mr. Harvey instructed her to stop the process immediately and send out a letter by the sheriff's office to let the voters know there will no longer be a hearing. She advised Mr. Harvey, informed her election supervisor Todd Black, said he was counting all of the votes, and she said okay. On March 10th, Deputy Registrar Brooke Deal sent a second letter to the electors and advised them that they would no longer have the hearing. Investigator reviewed the order that was filed in Calhoun County Superior Court on March 12th, 2021, and the order states the following: A hearing having been held on petitioner's motion challenging the 2021 municipal voter registration list pursuant to OCGA 21-230 and petitioner's request for hearing and inspection of applications for official absentee ballots, and upon consideration of the arguments presented by counsel for all parties, it is hereby ordered, adjudicated, and decreed as follows. The Calhoun County Board of Registrars shall convene in a timely fashion and is required pursuant to Georgia law to review any challenges posed by the petitioners as it relates to the 2021 municipal voter registration list for the city of Arlington, Georgia. The Early County Board of Registrars shall convene in a timely fashion and is required pursuant to Georgia law to review any challenges posed by petitioners as it relates to the 2021 municipal voter registration list for the city of Arlington, Georgia. In the court order, the judge did not address anything in reference to the application for a voter to receive an absentee ballot that were typed on the top portion. The investigator met with Chief Registrar Sarah Causey, Deputy Registrar Brooke Deal, and Calhoun County Attorney Ben Harrell. Ms. Causey said they sent the letter out on March 9th, 2021, based on what the judge said on March 8th, 2021. She advised the election was on Tuesday and it was a very small window to do it. The Attorney Harrell stated at the conclusion of the hearing that the judge gave an oral order to the parties. Attorney Harrell advised that there was that pressure from the judge saying that in court that they had an election coming up next week. He advised if they received the court order the next day, it would have been really helpful. Attorney Harrell stated that they felt the court hearing that if the board did not act immediately, they would have been in violation of what the court was saying to do. He advised he would have advised the board if they did not do what the judge said, they would have been in contempt of court. Attorney Harrell stated that this was their mindset, and there was definitely the sense that the judge said to do this. During the investigation, it was learned that Shirley Jackson provided assistance to Willie Barnes to request an absentee ballot. Mr. Barnes needed assistance because he was unable to read the English language. Shirley Jackson failed to sign the application that she provided assistance to Mr. Barnes. For potential violations, Shirley Jackson, elector, there is evidence to suggest that Shirley Jackson violated OCGA 21-231A1AF, making of application for absentee ballot, and that Shirley Jackson assisted Willie Barnes to fill out an application to request an absentee ballot because he was illiterate. Shirley Jackson failed to sign the application that she provided assistance to Willie Barnes. There is evidence to suggest that Calhoun County Board of Registrars Sarah Causey and Brooke Deal violated OCGA 21-597, intentional interference with performance of election duties, and that Randolph County Election Supervisor Todd Black was contracted to supervise the March 16th, 2021 special election in the city of Arlington.
You done?
That was it.
Thank you. I wasn't quite sure, and I didn't want to interrupt you.
It was a lot.
All right, those are the allegations and the potential violations in this matter, which is 2021-88. Is there anybody here to respond, either Ms. Jackson, somebody from the Calhoun County Board of Registrars, Chief Registrar Sarah Causey, or Deputy Chief Registrar Brooke Deal? Are any of those people here? So there's no response. Is there any motion on this matter?
So moved, Mr. Chairman, to accept the recommendations of the investigator
And to refer
and to
to,
refer to the Attorney General's office.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation of the investigator and to refer this to the Attorney General's office. In this, I think we just refer it to the Attorney General's office because it's not entirely clear as far as what would be a proper resolution.
Yes.
And I think we need their advice. Does everybody agree with that? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we refer matter 2021-88 to the Attorney General's office. Is there any discussion on the motion? There not being any, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion carries. And that completes the violations list. I do want to say, make one clarification on our vote on the letter cases. When we voted at the very end in those that we did not deal with individually, there was a case which is 2022-28 Richmond County involving voter registration. Before the hearing, the parties in that matter came to me and said that they hadn't received notice of this hearing, although they were here, but they were here mainly to ask if the case could be continued, and I agreed to continue. And failed to note that when we did the motion, but the motion would cover all the cases that were not voted on individually, except for 2022-28, which was previously continued upon my decision. So we will see them at the next meeting. The next order of business on the agenda is the report of the Attorney General, who will report, as you know, because if you've been here, we do have a smaller crowd than we did before, but you were, I think, all here. You know that there are some matters that we refer to the Attorney General's office. These are matters that were previously referred in previous meetings to the Attorney General, and now they're being reported back to us after they have considered them. So Charlene McGowan is our lawyer, and she's at the podium and ready to start, I assume.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the Attorney General's report today, we are presenting a number of consent orders, which are resolutions that were negotiated with the named respondents in each case. Some of these are consolidated cases, specifically the consent orders with Hancock County, Peach County, and the City of Forest Park. Those all resolve a number of cases that are listed in the agenda. We also have two final orders, which are cease and desist and reprimand orders for the two cases listed on the agenda, and those involve individual respondents. I'm happy to entertain any questions that board members have regarding any of the specific cases, but otherwise, on behalf of the Attorney General's office, I recommend that the board approve these orders.
Yes. So move. Okay. And these have all been provided to us as board members before the meeting, so we've had a chance to review each of them. I don't know if, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you just generally describe what these matters are and what the recommendation is that you've made to us, the orders as they're presented, or is that too complicated?
Do you want me to go through each case individually?
Yes, if it wouldn't take too long to do each case. Well, I don't know, that would take a long time, wouldn't it?
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to go through each if you'd like.
You all are very differential with me. Sometimes you ought to say that's not really a good idea, but since we all have read this, there is a motion to approve the orders as they have been submitted to us by the Attorney General's office. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is carried and granted. That is the last of the orders and the matters on the agenda, but there are still some other things we need to do. And specifically, those of you that have signed up for public comments, we would like very much to hear from you now. I'm going to call you up in the order that you signed up, and I would just ask for you to be succinct, and if it's possible, kind of keep it somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. So the first person would be Frank Schneider.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Where would you like me to stand?
Why don't you speak from
From the other places? Right
mic
here?
number 5?
Sure.
Well, maybe it'd be better, I think, for the videographer for
Up
you
to
to go
the
up to the podium. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, you have several members of this audience who are very well versed into how these hearings are done. They have been very good to always attend.
Well, having never attended one, I'm learning a lot.
I'm seeing that to be the case, yes. My name's Frank Schneider. Thank you for the work you do and the value that you make for this state right here. It's important work that you do. A couple things on my mind today. First off, we talked about keeping voter rolls clean, and I think you're aware of how critical this is in a fair election. And I'm glad that Mr. Evans earlier brought up ERIC, the information system that's used to keep data updated and synchronized across different states when people move. That's one of the things certainly that it does. I got the impression that a number of you perhaps may be getting a briefing from Mr. Evans at some point about the ERIC system. And there's a couple things in particular that I'd like you to pay attention to. One is the founding of this company and who the founders are and the backgrounds of those founders, who's funding this organization and funded it from its beginning, who its leadership is today, and their backgrounds. And two other things that I'd request as well. I looked for it and I didn't see it, but I'd be interested in seeing the contract that the state of Georgia has with ERIC. I think that that seems appropriate that it be publicly displayed where we can all read it and review it. And then I think I had one final matter too. Yes. I'd like to see a process implemented by which if the voter rolls are updated on a monthly basis using the ERIC process, it seems reasonable that we'd want to see not the specific individuals, but the number of people that are taken off the voter rolls and the number of people that are added to the voter rolls. So we can kind of get an idea if voter registration is increasing, net voter registration, if it's staying the same, if it's decreasing. Does that make sense with population growth, that sort of thing, okay? Second point I'd like to make has to do with what we talked about earlier with the possible fraudulent entry of ballots into ballot boxes around the state. I know we talked about one specific example. And what I'd like to suggest, perhaps a question first, are you all familiar with the movie 2,000 Mules? And have you seen the movie? Okay, I see a few smiles coming up. I see a lot of smiles coming up. I would suggest that the information contained in this movie and the petabytes of cell phone ping data should provide some insight as to people that were around the drop boxes in our state during that critical time period 3 weeks before our election and up through Election Day. I won't talk about the runoff at this point right now, but I think you would find that movie very insightful. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Snyder. Mr. Quinn?
Good afternoon. William Quinn. I'm a resident of Forsyth County. So I was thinking about how to sort of put a theme around my points today. I think it's going to be one of risk. I want to make note of something, and I will thank Mr. Mashburn for a comment earlier today. Those who govern must, if I get this right, must be willing to stand before the people and answer for their judgments. Sounds right to me. So much of what we talk about in these meetings has to do with our law and our goals for elections. Georgia law prescribes that elections be secure and accurate, and in previous meetings, you all have taken great care to explain steps you've taken to make sure that they are in fact safe, accurate, so forth. Your own state election board duties list that you are to promulgate rules and regulations so as to obtain legality and purity in all primaries and elections. So, on June 3rd of this year, 2.5 months ago, the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States government released a report detailing 9 separate vulnerabilities contained in the Dominion voting systems, and these are the same systems we use all across this state. These vulnerabilities open the systems to be exploited and may be able to insert malicious code. So in other words, taking control in some ways of the systems and manipulating data that may be contained in these systems. How would that appear if this were to occur? Perhaps as anomalies in the reporting, perhaps in anomalies in the way the votes appear after the fact. I think you're aware that many people across the state have brought forward anomalies. In our last meeting, I offered to deliver to the board reports from the cast vote records from a number of counties that show unusual patterns in votes, differences in the way the votes counted up based on the method that they were used to be cast. That seems odd. So we are, on one hand, you're told to secure the elections, make sure they're accurate, and yet these machines continue to be used all across the state. And yet we have this government report that says, oh my gosh, they can be manipulated. Now, add to that something that Frank brought up just a moment ago. 7 days ago, the same company that did the investigation surrounding 2,000 mules held a meeting with over 100 people to disclose a number of pieces of information, including some things that had come up in part during their investigation. Within that, they discovered a Michigan company whose election software and apps had been sold and were in use across quite a number of counties and states in the United States. That software is said to be communicating information on 1.8 million poll workers. Their names, their children's names, finances, location, even poll location schematics of the places that polls are located and how they're put together. The most concerning thing is they found this information residing on the Unicom internet backbone on a server in China. More information's been surfacing since this first came to light about 8 days ago and has been on national broadcasts as late as last night. If you think the people in Georgia aren't paying attention to this, mistaken. Thousands upon thousands of people are watching this very closely. It's the reason that we have about 3 times as many people in the room as we've had in the past, I think. Even the machine contract itself here in Georgia runs afoul of Georgia law. It prescribes the use of non-human readable proprietary barcodes, but more importantly, allows a device that is using software or subroutines and computing, which is prohibited for an election device under OCGA 21.2-2, 7.1.
Mr. Quinn, how much longer do you have? I'm being pretty generous.
Just about 30 seconds.
Great, thank you.
But I can go as long as you would like.
Well, you know, I suspected that's the case.
Okay. So here's my question. This sounds like a lot of risk to me, and it does to many of the people in Georgia. The question now falls to y'all. What are you prepared to do to mitigate this risk? The solutions are not easy, but there are ways to mitigate this. One, and I know you're not going to like it, would be to go to paper ballots and make a change so that we could be assured of valid and accurate elections. I have copies of the documents supporting everything I've said. I'm available at the board's discretion at any time for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Balbona?
I'll keep it short. I wrote it out for 2 minutes, so there we go. Oh, that's not 2 minutes. All right, so I'm George Balbona. I'm from Cobb. I'd like to congratulate Sarah Koth. Recently, Sarah was promoted to SOS Chief Investigator. I hope she can now expedite my complaint regarding the Cobb County Elections Department unlawfully receiving boxes of ballots under seal. I submitted this complaint over 16 and a half months ago, and it still has not been properly investigated or assigned a case number. I want to know why DeKalb County's elections director, former elections director, Erica Hamilton, was placed on extended leave of absence prior to her resignation. DeKalb VRE didn't even respond to my first open records request in brazen violation of OCGA. Sarah, I submitted a complaint regarding this, and it has not been properly investigated or assigned a case number. When I finally received responsive records from DeKalb, some emails were completely redacted. No names, no dates, no words, nothing. This is untenable. Even the heavily redacted Mueller report informed you of who was being redacted. I believe Erica Hamilton was forced to resign partially because she submitted a mid-year budget that was $4.48 million more than the approved budget. Perhaps Erica unlawfully allowed bad actors to access voting machines like Coffee County, and she needed millions to purchase new voting machines. Who knows? Erica definitely violated county purchasing policy by improperly continuing to employ a PR company after their grant had ended. In order to cover this up, Erica lied to the Board of Commissioners regarding last-minute BOC substitute item 2021-3005. Erica made it seem that these funds were solely to pay for the marketing of upcoming elections, when in fact, $375,000 were to pay for services already provided. Remember, by a company that did not have, what was not properly hired. Long story short, is that a criminal offense? Misallocation of county funds? Negligent misrepresentation?
Thank you, Mr. Balbona. Ms. Davenport?
Good afternoon to the chair and the board. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to you this afternoon.
You're welcome.
My name is Karen Davenport. I live in Decatur, Georgia, DeKalb County. As I have said through the hearings today, I'm here to encourage the State Election Board to make decisions, as you noted in your opening prayer, that are right. And as I read your task descriptions, actions that are in the service of the voter. Among many of the items the State Election Board has considered today are cases based on unfounded claims of voter fraud. I want to encourage the board, as you make decisions and recommendations, particularly the recommendations you make to the legislators, to look through the lens of how your decisions are impacting all voters. All voters don't have computers. All voters don't have iPhones. As I listen to many of your responses in response to grants, as well as voter registration, I encourage you to look at the infrastructure that currently exists for voters in Georgia. There are issues, in my opinion, that need thorough investigation. because some of the things that we have in place are very much voter suppression for many voters, handicapped voters, voters that are not wealthy. I also want to encourage you to look how the current infrastructure for voter registration, knowing where to vote, when to vote, who is running. There are elements in our current structure that make it difficult for Georgia voters to vote. Please consider, as you make decisions, that there are serious issues that the board must deal with throughout Georgia to ensure election locations are open and operational for early voting daily from 7 to 7, helping voters navigate the more difficult absentee process, voting on designated Saturdays and Sundays. So I implore you, I beg you to definitely understand and take seriously, which I'm sure you do, some of the voting suppression issues that currently exist in Georgia. I encourage you to continue to make decisions based on truth, not unfounded claims of voter fraud, which clearly undermines our citizens' trust in our elections and voter process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Adams? Ms. Hall?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
My name is Candace Hall, and I'm a Fulton County voter. I've been voting since I was 18 and watching my parents vote since I was 4. I'm coming up on 40. Thanks for hearing me today. I appreciate the comments about data being messy. I make decisions based on complicated data daily, and messy is an understatement. I also appreciate and look forward to the standardization of processes and practices that surround the act of voting. I'd like to make comments and a request on behalf of democracy and free and fair elections in the state of Georgia. Georgians agree that we have the right to vote in free and fair elections, and I fully expect to be able to exercise that right without threats or fear of intimidation of any kind. I want that for every single Georgian, regardless of party affiliation or political affinity. The 2020 election is settled. The results have been confirmed, not once, not twice, but 3 whole times. Any entertainment or amplification of unproven claims that say anything else undermines the trust we have in our voting process. It also leads to unnecessary and problematic restrictions to the free and fair voting that is the right of the people. Logic tells us that if we examine the elements of an argument and find that the premise itself is false, the conclusion, therefore, must also be false. We've done that 3 times. I consider this matter to be settled. Instead, I would like to see the State Election Board refocus and commit their support to the elections officials in each county as they prepare for what is sure to be a high voter turnout election this fall. Chasing bad faith allegations of voter fraud is a waste of everyone's time and chips away at the voters' confidence. It's problematic, it's inefficient. At the very minimum, I would ask that the State Elections Board consider promulgating rules that will help counties better implement SB 202, the Election Integrity Act of 2021, and take intentional steps to make sure elections are freely and fairly accessible to every eligible voter in this state. Let's make the rules and the messaging surrounding those rules clear for Georgians, and let's do that with integrity. I'd like to offer the ABCs of writing, which is what I do professionally: accuracy, brevity, clarity. Thank you for your time and your attention to this matter.
Thank you. Could you tell all the lawyers that write to me those 3 ABCs?
The ABCs: accuracy, brevity, clarity, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
That's a cheap shot.
I'm a lawyer, I can say that.
So am I. I agree.
Ms. Reardon?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for serving and all the work that you do. I just don't know where to start. Let's see. No matter how many times you say there was no fraud in 2020, that doesn't make it true. I'm going to start there. So the duties of this state board are to make sure we have safe and fair elections. And I don't know where everyone was in the room, but we just went through a lot of cases today, and some were fraud, some were not, some were because they didn't know what they were doing. It was a new system in 2020, but you can't just say there was nothing, because I think we've sat here through, what, 5 or 6 hours. But some of the things that I wanted to comment on were the private funds. Last session, there was a bill that the legislators tried to figure out how to equitably distribute the private funds. It got shouted down, I was in the room, and it didn't go any further. There seems to be a lot of controversy around just how to disseminate private funds, which is crazy. So you've got that to look forward to. If you have any, ways that you can offer them, I'm sure they'll be appreciative. The 10 p.m. deadline. I live in Cobb County, and I was, just an example, primary, 10 p.m. That was easy to meet. And we're, the second or third largest county in the state. It's really easy, folks. There is a poll manager at every poll on day of. They pull the tape, they look at the number, they call it in to the supervisor. That's day of number. Then they got till 7 o'clock to get the ballots, the absentee ballots. Those can be counted very easily. They don't have to be scanned, they don't have to be opened, they can be counted. We have X number of ballots. So up to that point on election day, you have your advanced voting. Those tapes are pulled on election day in our county between 4 and 6, 4 and 7, and those numbers are available. These are the number of people who have voted. Now, the absentee ballots, they start opening up depending on how many we have, like a week, 8 days, 9 days ahead of time. Those numbers are known. Now, we do not want to go back to 2020. We do not want to go back to when we're sitting in the Secretary of State 3 days after the election, 4 days after the election, still can't say how many absentee ballots there are in Fulton County. So obviously people are going to be up in arms about the fact that we don't know, and they keep adding ballots. Where are they coming from? So that rule, I think, is a very good rule that the legislators made for 10 o'clock on the day of voting. They can at least have the numbers. Eric, I do not like Eric. I don't think I know anyone called Eric, but this Eric system I do not like, and there are many reasons, and you can research it just like the gentleman before had said. Louisiana just canceled their contract. There are a lot of problems with Eric. I had a little discussion with Mr. Evans, and I look forward to having more open discussion on this topic. This is really important to me. I'm an immigrant. My vote is very sacred to me, and I went through a lot to get that privilege to vote. So this is very important. So when we have inflated, bloated, too many people on the voter rolls, that is the whole source of fraud. And I saw it in 2020. So we do have to keep our voter rolls clean. In Cobb County, we've been challenging voters, and there doesn't seem to be an adopted method of doing it from county to county to county, even though we have state law that says how it should be done and what should be done. So I suggest that you work with that and come up with the counties, the method, because we go through NCOA, the data, against the list, find out there's 5,000 people on there that shouldn't be on there. That's about the number. This was a few months ago. So then we start running those against how many of these people have had an address change and moved to all the different all the different states, okay? And then those people have registered to vote in those states. take those, and they've been sent to the board and the supervisor. They send out the letters. They get letters back or responses back, or they don't. And we're sitting there through all this work, and they've changed the rules twice now. And this past meeting, 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago now, they decided they didn't even vote on the 106 that should have been removed before the 90-day deadline before an election. Various reasons. Oh, you can't use NCOA data. Well, yeah, you can. Mr. Evans just explained that earlier today. They run their voter rolls against the NCOA data. And then it's like, well, you got to prove that they voted in another state. You know, you can be registered to vote in multiple states. It's not illegal. These are the things that we get back. But it's really not illegal, but there should be a method that if somebody moves from our state or to a different county or within a county, that they should know that they have to remove themselves from the voter rolls in Georgia. And that seems to be something that people just don't know. Okay, pivot Fulton County, just one little thing. I wish that that had moved faster, because my son voted in the mayor election in Atlanta, and they didn't even ask him for his ID. So there are still a lot of problems in Fulton County, because you need to have an ID to vote. Dead people are still on the rolls. People with addresses having P.O. boxes. Vacant lots are still on the rolls. This should not happen in our country. We are really getting to be a third world country. I want an investigation into why Mr. Rasenberger had just on his own decided that he was going to spend $5 million since February, and with some consulting, do something about the register and the rolls, use Salesforce. I mean, I asked questions, nobody knew the answers, but we really need to get to the bottom of this. We really need to have a uniform way of removing people who do not live here and who are dead off the rolls, because we can see them come back and vote again, and that happens as well. So my name is Pamela Reardon. I'm open to discussion and helping and having a dialogue with everybody and helping with having some uniformity moving forward with some of these problems that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. Mr. Walters?
To address the Toys for Tots in the schools, my wife and I volunteered setting up the boxes and collecting for 46 years. And a couple of the commandants invited us up to D.C. for the silent parade. And the instructions we received...
A little closer to the microphone, please. I can't hear you very well. No, you're on.
Push. Is that it? Better?
Yes.
I was just flashing back to an earlier subject, but
thank you.
The headquarters in Quantico did tell us to keep our boxes away, because it's in voting season, right? Christmas, collecting toys and voting, but they did tell us to do that most years. Yeah. I was on the punch list. So I'm hitting a subject that came up several times earlier today. I retired 11 years ago and subscribed to as many obscure government newsletters and reports as I could. And they just pop up. The Dominion voting machines has a list that this other gent referred to of vulnerabilities to the Dominion software. And supposedly the Department of Homeland Security prior administration had vetted them and decided this is an adequate machine and endorsed them. And I think that's why most states wound up with them. But I'm not dead sure about how that flowed, but Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas's organization, and I spoke with Jen Easterly, Director of Cybersecurity, have a charge to look at all computers that interact with our government, federal or state, in any way, and look for any flaws that they should find. So that's the list of, there's 9 items on last week's report. It's been high as 11 or 12 on the first reports that I was copied on. And let me just read one, the number 1 item here, and they're all kind of similar. Not only are they vulnerabilities to the system that are known, but they're undetectable. The machine was built to be undetectable. And in speaking with the White Hat, the good guy programmers at night at Cybersecurity and Department of Homeland, they said we can't call by department policy any of the Dominion voting machines to have caused any errors in the voting system because those hacks are undetectable. So we can assume that might be where it came from, or we can think that's where it came from, but they're backing away from it. And June 6th of this year, Jen Easterly threw it over the wall to the states, the Secretary of State in each of the 50 states, asking for an inventory of all the machines in your state by county, who inventoried them, the machine ID number, and have you put in the patches that we requested between you and the vendor, Dominion voting machines. And it doesn't surprise me that there's hacks all over the place by any number of bad actors, but just the first item here, I'll read. The tested version of Dominion voting systems, ImageCast X or version 10, does not validate application signatures to a trusted root certificate. So I got no skills, but it looks like it doesn't validate itself anywhere. Use of a trusted root certificate ensures software installed on a device is traceable to or verifiable against cryptographic key provided by the manufacturer to detect tampering. Well, Department of Homeland Security told me we didn't buy the fully protected version, we bought the unprotected version. And the question from the vendor is, well, if you pay more money, we'll program anything you like. Well, no, let's just stick with the machine we're looking at, because they'd already sold it in other places to other governments. An attacker could leverage this vulnerability to install malicious code, which could also be spread to other vulnerable image cast devices via removable media. So if a hacker can get into the first machine, they can spread it through code to all of the other machines in all the other states. And it's a very dangerous setup, I would say, and I think others are worried about it as well. So does this board then have any oversight or control or interest at all in the Dominion voting system? I mean, I would think you would, but I don't know if that's outside of your parameters, or even talking with Secretary Raffensperger about Jen Easterly asking for an inventory of our machines and have the patches put in, she suggests. So, the little handout I put together is just one out of about 75 pages of reports on various companies, but everybody's in there: Motorola, Apple, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, people at Cisco, Oracle, everybody I've forgotten about. But all the big names are in there monthly with vulnerable items, and usually more fixable than this one, but it seems to be a danger. And then the policy at Homeland Security and cyber and their cybersecurity branch is, since you can't detect a hack and they're untraceable, we will have to say we have never found one. So that's the quick federal government answer. We've never identified it. And they've hired research professors from Auburn, Michigan, I think they mentioned Stanford out on the West Coast. And yeah, they're really digging into it, but they're running dead. And I thought the best answers were the fellows who call themselves the White Hats. They said they were some of their finest and brightest, but they need to be left alone to do their geek work there on researching. So that's all I wanted to tell you, and get any thoughts. does it get passed back to Secretary Raffensperger to answer the cybersecurity questions? Are we going to get, and as a voter and born and raised in DeKalb County, I'm interested in us and all the Georgians being safe in our votes, right? And the reports obscure reports I subscribe to were mostly to do with national security. Is something out of this department going to affect national security? And I think we all know from the 2019-20 elections that elections count, right? That's what they always say, you know, your vote counts. And so since this is where you make the sausage, I thought I'd put that up in case you think it needs any further pursuit.
Thank you, Mr. Walters.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Metz? I'm sorry, have you signed up?
I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Aziz. I'm running a live stream integrity training program today. So if I may address the board and present to you what he has that are you prepared?
All right. Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Public speaking is not one of my things to do, so I appreciate this. Ted has a lot of confidence in me. My name is Betsy Jorgensen, and I'm actually in Forsyth County. Real quick, he's given me something to share with you. And this was a letter presented to Judge Paul Nally. It was a letter Mrs. Davis had asked. And she asked this question: why is it our state election board will not authorize emergency hand-marked ballots? And Judge Paul Nally responded, because Mrs. Davis, they don't have to, nor do they believe their paramount duty requires them to judicially challenge a void contract to protect the people of the state. They prefer, for a politically expedient view, to assume that Raffensperger would not enter into a void contract. The law, OCGA 21-2-334, clearly gives the election superintendent, whether that be an individual or a local board of elections, the authority to make the decision for any other reason to authorize the use of paper ballots for in-person hand marking at any election. Of course, Raffensperger continues his threats to lower election officials. That won't be a worry. You see, the original contract, which brought us the Dominion solution, signed by the parties on July 29th and August 12th, 2019, is void, both as a matter of law and of fact. That is due to the provision of the attached Exhibit B, paragraph 3.1, which both parties agreed that Dominion would provide an illegal piece of equipment which would produce an illegally formatted piece of paper defined as a ballot. Clear violation of OCGA 21-2-2-7.1. Of that fact, Raffensperger was aware, yet accepted it, providing his certification of illegal conduct, even though he knew or reasonably should have known of the illegal piece of equipment, the BMD, and its illegal result. This, as a matter of law, resulted in an intentional fraud being perpetrated upon all the legal voters of Georgia, which has been continuing over the last 5 elections, all of which are void. Kemp versus Mitchell and Company. 216 Georgia 276, 282 through 283 in 1960. With the collusion of multiple conspirators, including the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, the State Elections Board, Governor, Attorney General, Speaker of the Georgia House, the President of the Georgia Senate, various judges in the state, at least one federal judge, the GBI, and not to mention a multitude of lawyers, including the U.S. DOJ, aided and abetted by the indifference to their ignorance of the sheriffs and the grand juries of this state, and least we offend by failure to mention the FBI, the 46th, the U.S. Congress, and the leadership of the Georgia Republican Democrat parties. This has been, without a doubt, the most monumental fraud and theft perpetrated upon the people and shall be recorded by historians and legal scholars for centuries to come as they record the rise and fall of the Second Roman Republic in history. By the way, in conclusion, are you all fluent in Mandarin yet? Prepare ye for the second coming of the Dark Ages, of the second Dark Ages, where you can have your organs harvested with your vote. Respectfully, Paul Nally.
I'm sorry, this was a judge who wrote this?
This was a Judge Paul Nally.
And who is Judge Nally?
I do not know. This question by Ms. Davis was given to Judge Paul Nally, and this was a response forwarded to Mr. Metz, he's given to me to respond.
Do you know Mr. Nally, Judge Nally?
I do not know. I do not.
He's a retired judge.
Retired from what?
I don't want to say I've heard it before I've met him, but he is retired.
Okay. And so, I guess in conclusion, what I'm also to share with you, in October 2020, Curling versus Raffensperger, page 81, final judgment of that was ballots do not meet the definition of ballot prescribed in Georgia law. And the definition of a ballot, 21-2-379.22 and 21-2.300 A2, election system deemed critical in infrastructure. And this is the last point he was going to be making. Georgia's election code mandates the use of the BMD system as the uniform mode of voting for all in-person voters in federal and statewide elections, OCGA 21-2.300A2. The statement is correct, but does not notice stipulation of as soon as possible and certified by SOS as safe and practicable for use. A safe and practicable for use certification was, at the very least, a gross abuse of the SOS's discretion. So I thank you for your time. Ted thanks you for his time, and we hope his live stream and election training goes well. So. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your comments. Mr. LeSueur?
Hello, thank you. Real quick question on the grants. Is those outside grants, they come, I guess, lack of funds for those particular counties?
I don't think we had any testimony or any comment today about the source of the funds.
I was just curious as why the grants were being offered in the first place. I was just wondering if there was...
I think if you were here, the response was that these were mainly in 2020.
Okay.
There was no description about where they came from and that they hadn't seen very many grants today.
Just a point of question. I did want to get with you on some statistics and data that I'm looking for and have been looking for some time. I believe some of you mentioned that you're from the business community and familiar with business processes and so forth. And data and information is really important. I think it would help with transparency. I've been trying to get some data and statistics on some of these issues that you guys have been talking about for about a year now, contacting the Secretary of State, the Attorney General's office, and then lately your body as well. And I'm trying to get information regarding fraud, just basic stats as far as how many fraudulent cases are being heard, how many are being processed, how many have been found to be actual fraud, and how many have been found to be just fantasy. I think if we had stats on this, it would help to clear up some of the confusion and conspiracies we see out there. At this point, I don't know what percentage of these complaints are completely valid and how many are somewhere in between, and some are just as I say, conspiracies. Without information as to where this comes from, I don't see how we can make good decisions, or the legislators. If we can, one thing I have asked all these bodies is, for these fraudulent claims that have been caught, where were they caught? Were they caught after the ballot was cast, during the attempt to cast a ballot, during registration, or afterwards? Because if 95% of the fraudulent cases are being caught at the ballot box, that means you need to tighten up the registration. If the registration is, most of it's being caught there, then you don't need to expend resources to tighten that up. So having that information as to where these issues are coming up and where they're being found, I think is very critical. In that same vein, if you can share some of this information in an easily accessible form, that would help as well, so people could see the work that you guys are doing and see what is coming from that. The county I'm from, the school board put together a fact versus myth list, and that helped dispel a lot of the conspiracies that people were spreading around out there. And they also did a good job of quantifying some of the issues so that people could see what they were addressing and that they were addressing them in an efficient way. So if there's any way that you can come up with some sort of dashboard online, something to say, here's what we processed, here's what we're still looking at, this is where the disposition of these others ended up, I think that would be helpful to present to the people and see what's happened so far. So I would appreciate you considering that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Riggins? Riggins? R-I-G-G-I-N-S, Joseph Riggins. Guess he's not here. Mr. Ferguson?
Earl Ferguson, Fulton County. I'm one of the group that is exercising the Section 229 challenges to remove voters. We've been moderately successful. I'll give this board some of the credit for that because of the investigation of Fulton County. They sort of had to cooperate with us, and unfortunately our neighbors in Cobb and DeKalb haven't had that opportunity. I'd like to bring to your attention a situation which is really not covered in Georgia law. And that's the fact that a lot of our challenges, we don't know the outcome of. That's a poor grammar, but that's what the statement means. And going into the election, there are going to be a lot more because we're still submitting right now. I'll have some next month. And I'm concentrating on people who have moved out of state. And if they register in another state, they are not qualified to be Georgia voters. They should be removed. I'm not trying to get anybody who's for any other reason except they are not qualified to be Georgia voters. There's a provision in the federal law that says you can't remove anybody basically within 90 days of an election, so we can't have anybody removed. And the county has come up with a temporary category now that we are fitting into with all of these. Other counties may be in the same situation, which is why I wanted to bring it out in public to everybody's attention. Going into the election, if one of those persons who we have challenged and the challenge has been approved shows up to vote, what do we do? Well, if you look at 230, it means the registrar has to make a decision. And if there are thousands of those, and there could very well be, that is going to be a real problem for delaying or providing the manpower, extra manpower. So this is sort of a warning. As this is coming, I don't see any way to avoid it. And I'm the last speaker. I'm cold, and I, like the rest of you, are ready to get out of you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Although somebody snuck their name on after your name, so we've got 2 more speakers. J.J. Jorgensen? You're related to Betsy Jorgensen.
I am. She is my wiser half. Good afternoon, board and fellow Georgians. Did I bring my glasses? I didn't bring my glasses. Honey, I can't read without seeing.
I won't take that out of your time.
I'll be brief. My name is John Jorgensen. Again, thank you, board, for doing what you do. I'm realizing a lot of what it is to be a volunteer these days. I've been a citizen of Georgia since 1977, and I have voted ever since I have turned 18 years old here in Georgia. I am both ashamed and proud of myself to be here today. Ashamed part is because I have never been inside this Capitol before today. I'm proud of myself for finally getting up out of the chair and coming out here to be with y'all and allow you to hear what I have to say. I talk to a lot of people across where I've lived in many counties across this state, and right now I think most of them will agree that our voting system just is not in order. Voting and election integrity are a bipartisan issue. It is not just one side or the other, or even the people that like to lie in the middle. I think the confidence of our people has really, really been destroyed. Many of us are not happy with what is going on. So I would like to request to the board, to you guys, to use your sphere of influence to the legislature to please restore that confidence with the citizens of Georgia. I would like to request we move to a national voting day, and I would like to see the state of Georgia be one of the leaders in doing that. Not only would I like a national voting day where, you know, people like McDonald's and Waffle House who say 365, 7 days a week, they will not go out of business if y'all shut them down for one day when we all have a nice day to come. You won't have to worry about going to work. We all come do our citizen duty, vote, and get this stuff straight. And I would love to see moving to paper ballots as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And is it Cindy Battles?
Good afternoon. I commend everyone who has managed to make it through this marathon meeting. My name is Cindy Battles. I am the Director of Policy and Engagement for the Coalition for the People's Agenda. I just want to address 3 quick things that we've talked about during this hearing today. I'll be as succinct as quick as possible. SB 202 set up a system where County Board of Elections, election offices, that kind of thing could be reviewed. And we heard an update from Mr. Germany today about how the Fulton County review was going. It was suggested during that discussion that Fulton County should have to pay for observers because the panel is not capable of completing its work because they in themselves have election work to do. I'd like to say that I think it's unfair, especially with everything else SB 202 has put on counties to fund, that Fulton County would have to pay for its own observers. And I would also like to point out, if Fulton County was asked to do that, they could always request observers from the Department of Justice because those would be free. Regarding the information that y'all were talking about with voter registration and organizations that do voter registration, I want to point out a few things. things. Because yes, we send out voter education material to voter registration lists. Those voter registration lists are updated daily. So it's almost impossible to have an updated list of who's moved, who's died, who's registered, who's been purged, that sort of thing. And then, because of federal law, 90 days before an election, you cannot remove people. So if they've died, if they've had a felony conviction or anything else, HAVA makes it to where you cannot remove those voters. So what you're going to do is penalize organizations that are doing their best to make sure folks exercise their right to vote, because this information is not available online. And I don't think most of us would like it if our information was put online like that. We're paying money for those lists. By the time we get the list, those lists are out of date. And then we're going to be penalized for doing those things. So that, to me, is problematic. Another thing, because we were talking about the Collards Caucus. Y'all, I have a question. How is giving folks collard greens and cornbread different than a PAC supporting Herschel Walker giving out gas cards and groceries? Because they're giving these people information with Herschel Walker's picture on it. And what Black Voters Matter and Georgia NCP are doing is making sure folks have food, making sure there are toys, and giving them voter registration and voter education. It's nonpartisan. You don't even have to be a registered voter to get that information, to get all of the stuff that they're giving away. The collards, the cornbread, the toys, whatever. You don't have to be a registered voter. You just have to be a member of the community who showed up. As a matter of fact, I showed up to one, I got collards. So it feels like in an effort to make sure that things are on the up and up, if we're not careful, we're going to penalize organizations that are doing our best to reach out to disenfranchised voters, because there are plenty of them in the state. There are plenty of people who feel like their voices aren't being heard. And the work that we do is not only protected by the First Amendment, but it's encouraged by the National Voter Registration Act. So I want to be really careful when we're talking about these things that A, we're not making it impossible for us to do our job, and B, we're not punishing us for trying to make sure that people make their voice heard. And finally, I'm almost done. There was a conversation, and I'm sorry I didn't write the case number down, but about someone who had a temporary residence within his county or outside of his county. You've got Cook versus Board of Registrars of Randolph County. That went all the way to not just it went to the appeals court, and he was temporarily displaced outside the county. And he was still a resident of Randolph County. And I believe it was last year, maybe it was the year before, because sometimes things, but in Hancock County, someone whose home had burned was temporarily displaced out of the county, and that case was brought before the state election board, and he too was found that he was still a resident and a registered voter in his own county.
I think we agreed with you on that.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that people are understanding when we're talking about this, that there is precedent for that. Again, I really commend y'all. If y'all want any of our research that we've been doing on chain of custody stuff, the grant stuff, we're more than happy to meet with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you got on the list. All right, that concludes the public comment section of the meeting. I did want to report that we did during lunch have our executive session. We did talk about pending legislation against members of the board to get an update on where those cases were. And we made no decisions, reached no conclusions about anything. It was just a report on the status of the cases. So that means that we are done with the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So they were very quick about that motion. Did you notice that? How about, is it second? Is it second? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Then we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.